welcome to our panel on multicultural diversity and external dev. You probably all heard about diversity and the pivotal role it plays in our industry. What's absolutely fantastic about this panel and different is that they're going to be talking about diversity on a multicultural level. We have people from all over the world giving their insight. And I believe now, more than ever, the importance of acknowledging the multicultural diversity and external dev. I am super excited about this panel, and I want to introduce our moderator, Jenny Weiss, the Director of Product Development at EA Worldwide Content. Jenny and panelists.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited to be here, and we're so pleased to bring you this discussion, as Cassie said, on diversity and inclusion in our industry. It's a very complex topic and something that is very meaningful to many of us. So thank you for XDS for hosting us and having this conversation today, and to Women in Animation for sponsoring. Particular thanks to Christy Scanlon, who's here somewhere, and Tanya Poulter for helping pull together this proposal, and for helping me assemble this fantastic group of panelists. I'm so proud and excited to be part of this conversation. So many of you know from last year that a great conversation was started around diversity and inclusion. And we want to really build on that conversation today. It's a very meaningful topic, complex, deep, and a lot of our businesses are continuing to explore this more and more as both a key business objective and a company value, and obviously the right thing to do. So we are going to dig deeper into the conversation around diversity and inclusion, and each of these panelists represent a really unique perspective, a unique geography, a unique career journey, and so they're going to share their personal experiences with us around diversity and inclusion and really help us kind of dive deeper into that conversation. So I'm happy to announce our panelists. We have Annika, line producer, Technicolor India. We have Carolina. She is the Stay Relevant partner for Globant, representing Argentina. Laurent is the category manager for outsourcing and external development, Ubisoft, Paris, France. And Rebecca, representing EA Shanghai, China. So thanks everyone so much for being here. It's been such a great pleasure getting to know you during our earlier conversations and to start digging into your journeys and what diversity and inclusion mean to you. Let's go ahead and get started. So today, as I mentioned and Cassie kind of touched on, we really want to focus the conversation around the many facets of diversity, the challenges that many of us face and may continue to face in the areas of diversity and inclusion in a game development environment. We want to dig into what is unconscious bias and what does that look and feel like today. As Julianne brought up last year, it permeates a lot of what we do, but mostly is unintentional. It does have a large impact. We want to better understand how our relationships and productivity in business are strengthened with diversity, and discuss how the gaming business today is becoming more and more committed to diversity and inclusion as a critical business mission. So Annika, like many of our audience members, you've traveled the furthest to be with us today, so I thought we could start with you. Please tell us a bit about your career journey and what diversity means to you.
Absolutely. So I've been in the industry for 7 years now. I started with a TV production studio back in Bangalore, and since then there is no stopping. I've been with Technicolor for 5 years now, been associated with one of the top clients, working with them for 5 years for game studio. It's been great. What diversity means to me is mostly inclusion. It's difference in all form and manner. I think including all kind of diverse section is something very important that we don't get to see right now. In Technicolor, we have quite a bit of initiatives that we have taken personally. There's a group called Women in Technicolor. It's a women community that started 3 years ago, and we are doing a lot to keep the environment great for the women to join. There are lots of referral policies that we have in place to attract a lot of women co-workers in the studio.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. In our earlier discussions, you were talking about vigilance as key for continuing to build the momentum around a women's community and encouraging diversity and inclusion. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, the committee was founded 3 years ago. Until then, it was just an idea. We started for about 3.5% on our overall headcount. And last 5 years, now we are at 12%. The headcount has reached, all-time high, and we are continuing to increase that. In the part of the committee, we focus on 3 major things. One is the career growth, the leadership programs in creativity, and safety. So we have the first thing that we focus to get the women more in our studio is referral policy, wherein I recommend a female co-worker and I get a certain amount as a bonus. That's one interesting thing, and that has really helped getting the number high for the women. There are a lot of environment changes that have happened. There is good amount of initiatives that we have taken where we get the women together. We discuss the concerns or safety or what we can do to make the environment better. And I think when I go back and discuss with my other female co-workers or my friends, and I talk about how my studio Technicolor is so great and how I can attract the other women in the industry and join animation. Since it's creative industry, I think it attracts long working hours. That is one of the major things why a lot of women back in India don't want to pursue this as their career growth. But yeah, we are trying to change that by taking a lot of initiatives like this. We have Campus and School Connect, where apart from skills, we also try and focus to get a minimum number of female students to get in and join our industry. We take our existing women leaders to go and talk about and tell them, create an awareness as to how the industry is, how the environment is of this industry, and try to change all the mindset which is stopping other people to join. So that's few of the things that we are doing in Technicolor.
Fantastic. Sounds like really good progress taking place. Thank you. Carolina, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey and what diversity means to you?
Sure. I've been at Goldman for a bit over 10 years. 8 out of those have been in the gaming industry, but I've been in IT for going on 17, I think, by now. Diversity for me is a whole lot of things. Within my career, I haven't stayed in a single role. I've gone through many different roles, IT, sales and marketing management. Now I'm delving on marketing. So I've had a bit of a different and unique view into different areas of our company and many other companies. And to me, diversity is mainly understanding, inclusion and understanding, making sure that you see the difference in different people as something that is a positive to you. That can give you different views and different perspectives on whatever you're planning to do, etc. That translates into making sure you have a diverse group. Of course, that translates into specific actions, into identifying that you're not diverse enough, and all that comes with that. But I think the whole point is realizing that you need to have a diverse group to get the best out of everybody and to get the best final product or the best final experience that you want to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You were telling us that engineering domain in particular has been challenging in the area of diversity. Could you expand a little bit about what you personally experienced and witnessed in your career?
I definitely can. Industry-wide, we're at a 25 to 75 ratio of men to women. Engineering in particular tends to be about half of that, 12%. I studied engineering in university, and ever since university, I've always had to deal with guys coming up to me and telling me, oh, you're pretty smart for being a woman, and things like that, which can be a little bit devastating at first, but fortunately, I'm very strong-willed, and I just stay there, did lovely signs that said, careful, there's a woman here. I kind of busted through all of it. But it is a field that is very, very complicated. When you go into more hardcore technologies, I'm calling it hardcore, but when you go to C++ technologies or more old school technologies, that even goes a little bit further. Women tend to participate more on the lighter ones, the design-oriented ones, but finding a good female C++ developer that is respected by her male peers is still nowadays something that is not easy. Even ourselves in our studio, I think I can count the C++ developers with one hand, which is a bit of a bad thing.
Yeah.
fortunately, everybody is aware of that in our company, and as we put training plans in place, even for C++ developers, we encourage heavily for them to have a 50-50 split to kind of make sure that progressively that improves.
Absolutely. That, excuse me, that actually came up quite a bit, I think, from all of us, that, and I'm sure others in the audience can identify, you know, having worked in the industry, most of us around 10 years or more, we've seen the trends definitely go in the right direction. Certain crafts or disciplines more than others, in many cases having prior been the only woman in the room, that's definitely moving in the right direction, but particularly in probably the more technical crafts, we have a lot more to go. So Laurent, being our brave male representative in this discussion, please tell us a bit about your career journey, what diversity means to you.
I've been working for Ubisoft for 17 years now, in both business and production position. Actually, it could look a little bit awkward, as I probably tick all the boxes of what a stereotype is by working in video game, white male. But my background and my history is like actually I was raised by my parents in an environment where respect and being open-minded to differences, all type of differences actually, is something important and indeed enrich actually your life. So I've been into that mindset from very, very young, and when I started at Ubisoft, I really was happy to find actually a match, as I found out that the company had the same type of DNA in terms of having a multicultural orientation. I mean, today Ubisoft has offices in more than 31 different countries. We have like 12,000 people from 95 different nationalities, speaking like more than 50 different languages. So we by default, we are a multicultural company. And when I started, from the very beginning, I was working with many different studios around the world within Ubisoft, and also with external partners, something split a little bit everywhere. So I was very happy actually to be able to see that the diversity globally in terms of culture, so gender diversity, ethnicity diversity. For me, diversity is a little bit wider than just gender. I also talk sometimes about sexual orientation, can be disabilities, ages also. Making sure that you have a variety of people in your team, in your studio, that will together end up bringing something more than if you are all same clones. So I was happy to see that, and it's true that I realized when I was asked to actually participate to this panel that I was not that concerned, because working at HQ, I looked at around me and I said, well, actually it's quite good in terms of diversity. And when I looked at what happened in the studio, I said, well, there are clearly a huge difference. So it's true that when we're talking about metrics, the only one on which we can focus and have a look is the gender. I will lie that, I mean, Ubisoft as the whole video game industry is at the same average, so we have 25% of women in the dev team, which is okay, but could be better. We know that. But what is interesting is indeed we try to move in the right direction because it's important. It's important for Ubisoft, it's important for the video game industry, it's important for everyone to be able to reflect more diversity in your team, to then have in your game avoid like cliche or avoid stereotype, appeal to a more wider audience, making sure that video game is brought to everyone somehow. That's also one of our objectives.
Absolutely. What I recall most from our conversations leading up to this panel was the focus that you mentioned from Ubisoft, that distributed development, cultural diversity, it's about the quality of the product. It's not just a business objective. It's about establishing different viewpoints in order to garner a team that's going to build the best product possible. And that really lives and breathes. I think you mentioned it as the DNA of Ubisoft's culture, which I thought was really interesting. Is there anything more in terms of how that's cultured within Ubisoft as a core mission, and how that's a best practice within the global studios? You said 30?
31.
31, that's a lot of studios, yeah.
31 different countries. We have a little bit less studios because I integrate also the business entities into it. We have actually put in place globally, but also locally, a lot of initiatives to try to improve. There are a lot of things that needs to be done. And the first thing we realize is first we have to work on ourselves. So we can try to attract more women, for instance. I remember about discussion saying that we are also sometimes lacking. It's not just a question of we don't want women, we just are lacking of good candidates because it's a question of competencies. But also, it's important to start by yourself. And the first element I will suggest to anyone actually is to improve your diversity within your studio. The first thing is the inclusion and making sure that the workplace, like everyone being working, is feel welcome. Is very important because otherwise, I mean, they're not going to stay. So you can try to attract more women, more diversity, but if there's an awkward situation where they don't feel they belong and they cannot unleash their potential, they're not going to stay. So you start with that kind of basis, and it goes very locally, fighting the unconscious bias also with some trainings, workshop. We have a lot of initiatives to make sure also, even in terms of HR guidelines, to try to make sure that our job offer are very neutral, because even the words that you're using can be taken differently by different people, so you have to be very careful about that. There are a long list of things that are
cool. Fantastic. I definitely want to come back to the point that you're making about the gap, and that this came up in last year's panel discussion as well, the gap between the number of women that are in schools in our industry, but then translating that into a balanced career there's a gap there, there's divides, and then once they're in, the retention and growth. So we'll definitely come back to that topic. I think that's really important. But let's hear from Rebecca. So Rebecca, tell us a bit about your career journey and what diversity means to you.
I share some of the experience that Carolina had because I start from the pure hardcore R&D side of my career as well. And if people know that I'm a pretty small person. First time I remember when I first started my job, actually, I happened to run into a feature set that is focusing on server-side administrator type of feature. So going inside to do my spec review, and all this room is inside 30 plus people. I'm the only female inside, and being so short, and actually people hardly can see me from the podium. So they were like joking, and of course there was a lot of different languages, F words, a lot. and that was a cultural shock for me, being a foreigner as also a female in the room as well. So I from that point I was like, wow, okay, is this going to be a journey for me? It's going to be something different. As far as when I go to China to work, suddenly the things flip over around. Actually, I see a lot more female engineers. In China, I think we do have a lot of female women actually working, about 47%, I would think, somewhere around that. And then most of them, over 70% of those people, they really want to climb up the career ladder. So a lot of them will want to go to the C-level. And that's why in China, I start seeing a lot more proactive communication from the female side. But on the other hand, when it comes to the cultural difference, still compared to Western culture, Asian culture seems to be a little bit more subtle. So they behave differently when they're at home versus when they're in an international setting. So this is something pretty interesting from my side. Diversity definitely happen on our side day to day. Basically, we work globally with international studio, and we actually share design and implementation together, work together. So definitely it's going to help building a stronger product because we provide feedback from a different perspective sometimes.
Excellent. So something that came up as we all were talking is, again, that gap of bridging the balance in especially a female balance in career. At each company, it's something that seems to be continuing to be a challenge, and there's many different, we talked about the different kind of gaps in that process, that there is the link to education, Then there's the unconscious bias play out and just general challenge with recruitment and candidate assessment. And then once employees are in, then how do we retain and grow them across the diversity spectrum? Because again, this is a very complex topic, so it's hard to kind of cover everything that diversity can mean, as was mentioned. But we're trying to kind of understand the general trends. And I think, Carolina, you were talking about something Globin's doing with education.
Yeah, one of the most important things is when you go to universities, at least to technical universities, the ratio is still not very even. There's a whole lot more men to women ratio. And that has historical reasons. Women just don't tend to go to hard sciences as much. They don't do STEM studying as much. So we are partnering with different high schools and groups in Argentina where we are sending some of our experts, some of our SMEs to talk to them, to kind of entice them into what this world could offer, what it has, what it can do. And I'm not limiting it just to gaming. I'm talking about IT in general. Gaming, of course, is an area that suffers this, but the whole realm of engineering suffers it as a whole. So we've been doing that. We've been pretty successful with that. We don't have direct metrics because that's something where you just try to lure them in, but we've done workshops in our offices where we've had pretty good attendance, and we measure on top of that to see, okay, are we engaging them or are we not? And it's proven to be pretty good. There's also still a very big gap between the girls you actually get into university and the ones who graduate. There's still a bit of a lag there, but it's a process.
It is definitely an ongoing process. Julianne identified something in last year's panel on diversity, that there's the example of the symphony and the blind auditioning. So the connection with schools and kind of representation is where it can begin. And then in terms of offering more standardized and kind of blind recruiting processes, does anyone have those practices happening in your company to enable dismantling of just unconscious bias and bringing in talent?
I think in EA we are doing very good in China because I have worked in other companies in China before, and it was a cultural shock for me because in the resume they actually put down not only the age, gender, they will put down if they are Communist Party member or not. They will also put down their parents' job as well. And when I first saw those resumes, I was like, oh my God, I cannot even interview this person. No matter what you do, you get into your trouble. So I have to do a lot exercise with the HR managers to say, please make sure those information is being screened out. The manager, the hiring manager should not have any perception for the candidate before they get into the room. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything similar happening?
No, I would say that we don't have a process where we strip the information, but our recruiting team is completely unbiased. We have a recruiting team that is independent from the actual technical interviewers, and they do the first set of interviewing, and they do it solely on the experience and everything that comes from there. So by the time the candidate does that first pass, they come with a certain set of credentials, if you will, and there's no bias there. In fact, I think most of our recruiters are women, so that would even slightly give them an advantage, but it tends to be pretty fair.
Another thing that came up during our discussions was the credibility of the gaming industry as a whole, that how are our students or young people looking to the games industry traditionally as an actual relevant place to work, and having cultural support for that being a serious career where you can be really developing skills, becoming a leader, and being part of the business of gaming. So Rebecca, you mentioned at one point that eSports was actually transforming that in China as it became a much bigger entity in itself, that
Yes.
the population was starting to see gaming as more
positive.
More positive, exactly.
Absolutely. Actually, it's very interesting. I've seen some data recently talking about how female players are getting a very active role through esports. And I think in US, actually 1/3 of the professional league players are female right now. So this is definitely a very encouraging data. And also in China, we start seeing that government is actually opening up on game industry through encouraging eSports. There's a lot of professional leagues set up right now, and they are actually having some policy. Like in Hong Kong, recently, I think last month, they just announced that the government is going to sponsor this kind of activities going forward and encourage players. And because I think the government also see as eSports providing an opportunity for these young people that they may not be doing very well at school. They may have a problem getting a job placement, but now suddenly they feel like there is a place for them. So it actually provides a very positive attitude for the industry as well. And so I think there's a very high opportunities that we will change the attitude of like parents knowing like my kid is working for gaming industry. It's like, yeah, it's not that good. To like, really, you are working in this industry. This is something that we are trying to work with in EA in China. We have the Women's Ultimate Team program, which is actually getting all the female employee in the company. So we start building our pillars, different areas of focus. And one of the focus is actually community, which I always think that's a great way as an industry leader, EA actually lead that role and bring that message out to the community to tell parents and students, gaming is not that evil. Actually, you need to balance. The most important thing is do not avoid the problem or do not avoid something, but try to face it and be able to manage it positively.
Absolutely. Annika, you were telling us about similar difficulties in India, that not only is gaming not necessarily seen as a career path, but for women to go into that journey is even more rare. So how are you and Technicolor being part of kind of changing that mindset?
Like I said in my previous answer, that in this industry, it requires a lot of working hours, long working hours, although it says 40 hours a week, but it goes to 60 hours plus. There is no set in time, there is no set out time. So that's something that is letting the young females not join this industry, because yes, we all graduate. Yes, the graduation rate from the university in India is higher, like in China, but do they all make it to this career path? No, because again, as a woman, you have extra amount of responsibilities. You're a mother. You have to take care of your family, and you can work for like from 20 to 25, 26, but then after that, hey, you have to get married and you have to look at other things. So it doesn't calculate better. So what we are trying to do, what my initiative is, I have a lot of, so as a line producer, I have a lot of production crew that work with me, out of which 50 to 60% are women, and I try to personally educate them, try to change the mindset. It is just not, so my other male co-workers say that I'll have this production person work late because, she's the girl, she gotta go back. I said, did she mention it? Did she say it? That I have to go back? No, so please don't have that mindset already, unless she speaks for herself. So yeah, I mean, talking about it, confronting the issue is something that we really have to do now. I mean, a lot of the guys say that they are concerned about the safety of the women, that I don't need this person working late, not that she's any less skilled, but if she does not make it home on time, I might be responsible. So I said, I have been in those situations. I've said, please let the person speak for herself. You do not decide for her. So let it be honest, let it be transparent. So yeah, trying to talk about it, confronting the issue head on is something that is bringing a change.
Absolutely, and it sounds like mentorship as well in terms of you representing the female contingent at Technicolor and establishing relationships. Can you talk a little bit more about, are there any official mentorship programs, or is this happening more grassroots level? How important is mentorship in growing the female community?
I mean, like you mentioned about Christy, she's been a really good mentor for me, for a lot of women back in our studio. I mean, she's doing things in such a great way. I keep seeing her work, and she's tremendous. She's so good. I also work with a female producer. She's the only producer in the studio, but she has been an idol for a lot of women there. And we both, also our head HR is also a woman. She is so good. She's taking initiatives personally to eradicate a lot of these issues. And like I said, all goes down to the women committee where we come together. It's a focus group and we discuss the concerning issues, there are a lot of policies that they are in at place. So yeah, there are a lot of things happening and it's constantly changing. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some amount of time, some amount of hard work. So a lot of things are happening right now.
Absolutely, and that's something that came up again in our conversation again and again is that kind of point that was brought up in the Lean In book that is kind of at the heart of some of this discussion around opportunities for women and supporting one another as we pursue career growth and leadership positions, and having more women at the top means you're going to automatically kind of pursue a more diverse and inclusive mindset at the company and create a path forward. And I think Carolina and Laurent, you both mentioned that your companies represent really strongly in terms of female leadership. Could you share some
Yes, that's correct.
points on that?
Indeed, we have actually today 40% of our board members are women. And 50% of our CEO FDMO direct report are women, and you can find very strong leadership women at position where you could expect to have some men. So it's very strong. When I mentioned it was part of Ubisoft DNA, it goes from the top, and that helps indeed to spread this wheel. And everybody internally, I mean, as I said, at HQ it's much more balanced, and so from the top to the bottom we try to help the different studio to achieve that, maybe not that same ratio, but at least to move forward and to get into a position where they can attract, as we say. We mentioned it's not that easy. It's not always very well perceived. But it's definitely something that we can feel from the top.
Absolutely.
We're not in such a strong position as they are, sadly, but we'll get there. We recently appointed our first female board of directors member and our first C-level executive, woman C-level executive, which have been extremely celebrated among us women in the company because it's a great change. Among middle management, we are doing really well. We're 38%. I mean, compared to the overall company stats, it's a pretty decent number. But we had seen up to now a lot of struggling letting them get all the way up. What I will say is that one thing that I've experienced personally is that the first one, going from 0 to 1, is much more difficult than going from 1 to 2. So now that we've already done the very big first step, I think moving forward, it's going to be a lot easier for us.
Absolutely. That's really encouraging. Something that we talked about was the balance between forcing, these issues in terms of some companies are actually pursuing quota type situations or at least having targets for actual balance in gender as you mentioned, as a very observable metric compared to the other diversity elements, versus kind of waiting for it to happen, and the delta between those two things, that there's challenges with both, and so how do we actively forge a path forward? It sounds like each of your companies are doing something unique to their goals and their culture to pursue that. But we had a bit of a lively discussion on this the other day. Do we want to wait for things to happen, or do we want to get really active? And it sounds like, Laurent, at Ubi, there's plans in place and there's a culture that really focuses on this. Is this something that you think other game companies can learn from based on the success ratio that Ubi is showing?
First, I want to say that personally, I don't like quotas that much because then you get forced for the wrong reason. So you have to find why we need it. I mean, for me, it's obvious. I know it's not that easy, but it's obvious that it's really, for the whole industry, actually, it's really something that can bring the whole industry to another level. I'm not sure I answered your question, actually, but basically the overall elements that we put, we decided from group level and local level to implement some kind of, I mentioned workshop, committees, discussion roundtables around all those aspects to make sure that there is people are understanding also. Since it's a major male audience we have in our studio, it's also important for them to realize that there is something that is not matching. And to achieve, to move to be able to deliver greater game, we really believe that having a diversity within our dev teams is really pushing the boundaries of the creativity of the game, of the way they are perceived, and that then it's becoming also to another level. It makes the game becoming more relevant in some aspect. And when we are talking about attracting women also, if you don't feel like even the game itself doesn't appeal or same thing, you need to make sure that you can feel that you belong somehow to this industry. Another element I wanted to mention is that working in the video game industry, even in France, it's still not very easy. I mean, when I started, I told my parents, I'm going to work in the video game industry. They're like, what? I mean, it's like, no way, it's not a real job. I'm saying, yeah, well, actually it is, if you look at the company, what they're doing, but the lack of understanding, it looks like working video game is like just lazy guys playing video game all day long. Well, it's not the case, but in the more public audience, at least speaking for France, still video game doesn't have the, I would say, the aura. I mean, it's not known as it should. We talk a lot about movie industry, about the music industry, but video game is still not taken that seriously. eSports is indeed bringing something fresh and with a different angle, and people are starting to consider video game as something serious, so that's very indeed helping at all levels. But still there is some way to go to then being able to attract a wider, not just wider audience, but a wider diversity of candidates.
In addition to the content in the games that we're making, because I want to come back to that, that was another really interesting topic that kind of kept coming up as we talked. But what more do you think we can do in this space of game industry credibility to make that leap from student to career and a viable, credible, respected career? What more can we do in the industry to make that happen? Rebecca, do you have thoughts?
Basically, I think it's like we, as working in the industry, we have to kind of make it fun to do. We have to find the joy to do it, and actually, some of the things that EA is doing right now is we're looking into like bringing interns a lot more into the program early in their tertiary educations to introduce this industry to them in a whole new spectrum. Basically, it's not just playing the game, it's how you make entertainment, enjoyment through these video games to the audience, and get them to positively thinking about how female and male behave differently on the games, and be able to bring in new features and new design to actually successfully impress the audience. And so earlier adoption with this intern program is something that we are looking into to enrich our probably our workforce space for female participation as well.
There is a side point to that, which is as more people play games, as games are more in everyday life, people understand that the industry is mature, but we're still at a point where working for a game is something about passion. And it's good, but the thing is right now passion has to be the only driver, because you need to be willing to put up with a gazillion amount of overtime, and you need to be willing to put up with so much that sometimes passion is not enough. And if you want to truly attract a diverse crowd, we need to fix that. I think the maturity of the industry or of the concept itself, it's evolving, and it's going to get there just in a few years. But if we don't fix those core issues, it's still going to be a place where only if you're passionate you can work, and people are still going to see it as a niche thing.
And what do you think is at the root of that? Is that company values and kind of HR practices to create an inclusive and supportive environment for employees?
I think it's a bit of history. I think this ties a lot to Sam's panel, Sam's talk yesterday, and I talked to him outside. It has a lot to do with history. This industry is a young industry when you compare it to other industries, and it started like that, and we started doing very bad practices, and we started expecting people to love this as much as we love it, and things like that, and getting out of those bad habits is really hard, because once you're used to managing a budget that works with a certain overtime, you're going to get more than you would if you put that into the actual amount of hours or the actual amount of people. So it has an impact on how we manage features, how we manage our budgets, what our ROI is. It's a massive hit on every angle. And this touches not only gender diversity, it touches absolutely everything. But I think if we take care of that historical issue, which we are making some progress on, I think if we fix that, then we're going to have a much better proposal for everybody that wants to join the industry.
It sounds like, Annika, you're facing similar things with the relative newness of the industry in India, or at least relative newness of women working in the industry. Do you find that Technicolor is doing all it can right now to create the environment? You talked about the women's community. Are there other things that you think you can do to make it a more inclusive, welcoming place so that that credibility continues to grow and therefore has a ripple effect in terms of more and more attraction of a diverse workforce?
Yeah, I think having a good culture in the studio, the environment, what you have in the studio, it really matters. We have students coming in, doing a visit of the studio and actually seeing how it is set up and how the daily practices are, and they have a feel about how things actually happen. Obviously, they are taught something else when they are in schools and colleges or academies, but when they actually have a studio, like a field trip, and they see how things actually work out, they get to know by themselves that it is quite different. This is not what you've been, getting to learn by your professors, but yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that it's driven by HR mostly, because our HR is 95% women and just one guy, and he's like, what am I doing here? I'm like, you're the lucky guy. So,
It's like you here.
yeah, so a lot of things, like I said, my head HR she's a really strong, independent lady, and a lot of women look up to her. She has a lot of ideas, and she's actually practicing it, not just, talking about it. She has taken initiatives, and it has caused good results. We have seen a lot of changes. Like I said, it was 5 years ago, it was 3.5% of headcount, and now it's about 12%, which is a rapid growth. So having driven by HR and also the leaders that are there, like production managers or supervisors, we are pulling them in a lot of these people manager sessions where we talk about unconscious bias, where we tell them how insensitive it is to make a joke so that you sound cool, but that's not the case. You're not supposed to. So creating that awareness is happening. We are pulling a lot of leaders, because it starts with leaders, right? Because I go and I attend conferences, I talk to a lot of people, and it reflects my thinking, my studio's practices. So we start at the leaders so that they are educated, they are aware of what the norms are, what you're not supposed to talk, what issues are sensitive. So yeah, a lot of things are happening.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. And in terms of representation, it's one thing to have it in the leadership community, actually in the companies we represent, but also in our products. This came up when we were talking, our products have to represent diversity positively in a way that then attracts both the player community and a workforce that identifies with a product that has these positive representations, and that whole concept that's happening. The Gina Davis Institute has been working on something called "If She Can See It, She Can Be It." And Julianne again referenced this in last year's talk, that thinking about the representation we have for gender and other forms of diversity, if we're not having that in our actual entertainment products, then we're missing an opportunity, not only from a business perspective, but on the more meaningful side of establishing goals and positive representation for what females or those in other diverse communities can do. So what in your companies would you say is happening creatively to try to instill a more diverse product? And I think, Laurent, you were mentioning that this is very much a focus of Ubi. Is there something specifically on the creative side and the stories we're telling that are making it a more diverse product?
When you look at the Ubisoft portfolio, we more and more have like huge open world game based on different time zone, different settings. And the first example and the best example I have in mind, and I witnessed it actually directly, is that when we started working on Assassin's Creed, we gathered together a team that came from a very multicultural background in terms of religious faith and belief. And it was the only way to avoid getting into something where like it would become like kind of niche Christian, something weird. So the setting with Altair at that time for Assassin's Creed 1, it was a real leap of faith, actually, to figure out how we could really transfer something that will be appealing to everyone without hurting any feelings, and that definitely wouldn't work if we had like just set up as I said, a team of clones with the same mindsets. And as I said also sometimes when I meet my partner, external partner, it's important as well. Especially in co-development, it's very important to find out that in front of you, you don't have someone that wants to please you and looks like you, but that has his own personality and his own diversity. And that's what is going to bring something new and top and fresh and also challenge to what we're making. We started doing that internally when we started working in internal co-development with several studios. We saw from the beginning that even if it's sometimes hard to work with studios that are all around the world, each of them were capable of bringing something on top of what the main lead team was working on. And when we added on top of that, and Isabelle actually talked with Sperasoft just a little bit earlier today about having also some external partners that comes with a different background, with different diversity, is also bringing something to the game, and that's definitely something we believe in.
Absolutely. That came up in last year's, I think it was Lisa Wood said something about that last year, that distributed development in itself is helping kind of tear down these barriers for cultural diversity, and the fact that we're all working together on a daily basis means that we are innately kind of removing these unconscious biases and becoming more familiar with other cultures and learning the opportunities. And Carolina, this came up when we were chatting as well, that you mentioned looking at distributed development and cultural diversity in gaming development as an opportunity to see what to build on Laurent was saying, that each team brings a unique new perspective and something that's positive. There might be some challenges at first on how to initiate that partnership, but that ultimately there's opportunities there to get more for your product and for your company.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the ways to look at diversity is when you get more voices, you get better results, but it is up to us as managers to figure out how to handle those. And I don't mean to stereotype them and say, okay, this is, as Annika was saying, this is a woman, so she won't work late. I mean, getting to know your people. If you don't get to know them, your reportees or whoever, but figuring out how to get the best out of them and how to get them to work. For instance, we have a team, we are in 13 different countries, so even ourselves, we're very, very diverse in terms of who we work with. And sometimes I have to work with people from India, people from Colombia, Argentina, the US, the UK. And I know that for certain regions, I need to do a lot of micromanagement at the beginning, and then I can just sit back, relax. Then I know that other regions, Argentinians are loud like Italians, we are. And we will voice whatever we have to voice. So I know that I have to tame them as well. You need to understand who you're working with, so that you can polish them, and then you can get the best out of them, and they can have the best career path possible as well. And to give a very, very specific example, and this happened to me today in a phone call. I was talking to someone, and he started talking back at me, someone from, like not a client, but something like that. He started talking back to me, very bad. I was like, okay, no, shut up. You know this, you don't have to talk back. And that actually proved to be excellent. This guy called back a few hours later saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone like that. If I had gone to my true Argentinian self, I don't want to say that it was going to end that well. Yeah. So I had people who taught me that, and I think everybody deserves to have someone who manages them, who spends that time, who understands them and grows them from whatever they are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Going back to the creative representation in our products, Rebecca, you were mentioning that the mobile space in China is something that has opened up a lot of doors for the gaming community, and hopefully that then leads into a talent community as well. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
So for China, actually, because for technology-wise, China start a little bit later, so there's less burden. And suddenly, when the door opens up and all these operators able to operate on their cell phone, a lot of apps and games get onto that platforms and actually attract a lot of audience. Basically, majority of the users right now in China, well, by the way, China have 1.4 billion population. It's not a lot, but basically, a lot of them they start using mobile as their only source of entertainment. So definitely, gaming is one of those very important area. And some news say that the latest, one of the most popular games in China, it has about 200 million active users on a day. So and out of those, just data from last month saying that 47% of those are female. So meaning that actually the perception saying that stereotype having hardcore gamers being male only is not the case anymore. So we are actually getting a lot of those requests, and actually a peer over in PopCap saying that, well, actually PVZ actually is a definitely female-focused games, and we got all our revenues, so actually a lot from there. So all these kind of things actually help us to look into like, okay, are we actually doing a creative? Starting from the beginning, being genuinely creating the games that allow this kind of audience to feel attached and close to this particular game.
Absolutely. We talked about that a lot, that the content has to feel genuine.
Yeah.
It has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Diversity doesn't translate when it's a token effort. It has to be really deeply meaningful to both our products and our teams and our companies, and that's why the fact that this is evolving to be not just a company value but a business objective, I think that those things hand in hand can really make it effective and move forward a lot faster for everyone. So we're just about out of time. We want to leave some time for questions. Does anyone have any closing thoughts they'd like to end with?
No, we're just when you were mentioning about how in our game we have to reflect also what is outside in the real world. There are some initiatives that can be taken. One of them that just popped to my mind is like at Ubisoft we also, on top of the dev teams themselves, we have in the editorial team based in Paris, we have a team dedicated to accompany those dev team into the research. They go very deep about, okay, your setting is going to be, let's take the next Assassin's Creed for Egypt. And basically they're a team dedicated about, okay, what it is, what it looks, to make it true and as diverse also as possible, not just go, okay, we're going to play like just male, soldier, or whatever, but really we also can help by putting some extra effort on top of the team that are working on games to make sure that there is like kind of overview of this, the importance of being true and diverse to make the game as successful as possible.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and we want to take some questions, but I just have a couple of closing thoughts. So we really appreciate, again, that the panelists bringing their very personal kind of perspectives on diversity to us today, and also each of you for listening and truly considering what you can do for change. As Julianne brought up last year, there's incremental daily process changes we can each make that make this the entire conversation around diversity and inclusion move forward. And I think Christy also closed last year with some talk about how we can move forward. So I think as has been resonated in this conversation, and as I heard someone share a quote with me at work recently, it really seemed to strike the right tone to end today's discussion. And it's very aspirational, so bear with me. But I did want to share who better to call upon in the area of diversity and inclusion and to inspire us towards change than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he has a quote that I think I'd like everyone to think about as you kind of go home to your jobs and think about how can diversity and inclusion be part of my day job. If you can't run, then fly. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.